And there is a danger now that Netanyahu is basically waiting for Trump, because it's only another 6 weeks to the US election.
Mm.
And then the pressure from the United States will be off. Quite a lot of people in the world are waiting for Trump. Netanyahu, Putin, a whole series of people. So it's a grim situation, but there is still a better way out than the escalation of violence and war in Lebanon.
William Hague, how worried are you about what has opened up, this front that has now opened up after years of concerns that it would in Lebanon?
I'm very worried indeed. Of course, there's a very serious danger here that this could develop into a much bigger conflagration in the Middle East. Both sides have stepped back from that many times over the last year since the Gaza conflict began. But now it's really flaring up. There's only one real solution to this, which is to achieve the ceasefire in Gaza that so much diplomacy has been put into over the last few months. That would then remove some of the cause of the military action that's been going on the Israel-Lebanon border. But in the absence of that, Israel is now trying to ensure that people can go back to their homes rather than be under missile bombardment after a year. And they're embarking on something that could escalate very, very dangerously. And if you look at the history of the last 45 years since the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 and then again in 2006, this doesn't work out well for Israel. They always end up with fewer friends in the world and with a worse position in Lebanon in the end from an actual invasion of Lebanon. So if they're proposing to embark on that, I would really, really caution against it.
What else should Israel do? Because we have a lot of people who are very pro-Israel who get in touch with us and say, "Well, what do you want them to do? Sit there and be fired upon?" And the counter argument to that, of course, is that no, of course, you shouldn't feel unsafe in your homes. You shouldn't have to flee your homes. But the level of I don't know, the level of damage caused by rockets going into Israel, it's not nothing, but there is the Iron Dome to protect them. The level of damage going the other way seems to be disproportionate.
Yeah, well, what you expect them to do is to make every possible effort to achieve the three-stage ceasefire in Gaza that is on the table. Now, that's not totally within Israel's gift because that needs the Hamas leadership to agree to it as well. But the United States and Qatar and other countries have got very detailed proposals on that would involve freeing the remaining Israeli hostages, but coming to a staged ceasefire and agreement over Gaza. That would, given that the reason Hezbollah say they fire missiles that drive those people from their homes in northern Israel is because of the Gaza conflict. Indeed, they started doing so when after the October 7th attacks. Well, that would remove the reason, the ostensible reason for that. That is a better approach than going into a bigger war in Lebanon. There's huge disagreement in Israel about this. There have been hundreds of thousands of people on the streets demonstrating for Israel to take the hostage deal. And a different leader from Prime Minister Netanyahu would do that. So there is an alternative approach to escalating conflict in Lebanon.
But the option, nothing's going to happen while Benjamin Netanyahu's in charge. It feels, looking at what you just said, listening to what you just said.
Well, that is, certainly if I was in Israeli politics, I'd be on the side of his opposition, because I think he hasn't taken forceful enough opportunities to end the conflict. And I don't think that will be in Israel's interests in the long run. They will just end up with a resurgence of violence in Gaza, as well as the war with Lebanon. And there is a danger now that Netanyahu is basically waiting for Trump, because it's only another 6 weeks to the US election. And then the pressure from the United States will be off. Quite a lot of people in the world are waiting for Trump. Netanyahu, Putin, a whole series of people. So it's a grim situation, but there is still a better way out than the escalation of violence and war in Lebanon.
Kezia, what do you make of the next, well, between now and the end of the year? What are your kind of What do you hope might happen, and what do you think might actually happen as far as Lebanon and Israel are concerned?
Well, look, I come to this with nothing like the knowledge and understanding that William does, and I think, like most people listening this morning, will be deeply worried about what they're hearing and seeing, because we don't have an answer to when does this end. And I think, based on what William's just said, the only thing I can hope for is that Trump loses, and therefore Netanyahu runs out of road, he runs out of possibility, and his friends internationally have to tell him that this is no course, it has to come to an end.
Have you been to a doctor's or a hospital recently and found yourself seeing what is called a physician associate? Would you even know if you had? They tend to be former nurses or those with bioscience degrees, and then they're given 2 years intensive training so they can see patients. Well, lots of doctors think they are dangerous, and a group of them has written to the Times. One of that lot is Dr. Rachel Clark, who explained the history of physicians associates earlier.
Well, they were first brought into the NHS about 20 years ago, and then they were called physicians' assistants, and it was a brilliant idea. Use assistants who don't have the training and expertise of doctors to free up their time to do the really difficult things that doctors are trained to do. However, since then, cash-strapped hospitals and general practices have started using PAs more and more and more as a replacement for doctors.
Kezia, in 10 years' time, doctors might be primarily robots, might be AI-driven, and therefore that might be a solution to this. But in the short to medium term, there's this question, there's not going to be more money for more doctors. So do we have to make use of people like pharmacists on the one hand and physician associates on the other? Or is that a dangerous road to go down, do you feel?
Well, of course we should be doing this, but we're also so predisposed now to thinking that money's so tight in the public sector, everything and every development in a story is about something being taken away from us, rather than an actual evolution or positive change in the delivery of a service. And I think this could be a really good thing. I'm not sure to what extent these exist in Scotland, but we do have in Scotland a pretty established network of advanced nurse practitioners. And the last time I went to the doctors, it was an advanced nurse practitioner I saw, and she was able to prescribe and cover everything that I needed. And it was an excellent service. I got it far quicker than I would have got waiting for a GP, for example. And if we can use physicians associates and advanced nurse practitioners more in a proper triage system to make sure that, well people like me get what they need when they need it, we can really focus and concentrate GP time on the people who really need GPs. And I would like to think we could get to a stage now where elderly people in particular with long-term health conditions could go back to the days of having a named GP that they can always get a hold of, that they can really rely on, that understands them.
Yeah, so this might be a question of regulation and working out when you see these people. William, doctors have a history of having a closed shop in this country. They didn't want the NHS to exist back in the 1940s. Is there a smattering of being a doctor is a mystery and you have to be a part of the great mystery after years and years of training? Or is there a genuine concern you have years and years of training for a good reason, and when you have people with less training, it's more dangerous?
Well, then, mate, you're right. Doctors have been quite conservative with a small c over time, yes, about the NHS, or in more recent times about not wanting to share patients' data with the NHS when our ability to learn now from the data is so much greater and would be so useful. So, yeah, they can be behind the times. Nevertheless, you can see the legitimate argument going on here. I think this is just a case where the Secretary of State for Health needs to. That hooting isn't in my background, by the way.
Tell you what it is. I'll explain what it is.
Oh, it's not that tractor, is it?
No, there's an electric bus near me, and people are getting very excited. My experience, people who really like buses.
Oh, God.
And they're hooting away with merry abandon.
I thought someone had arrived with some trousers for you.
No. William, don't worry. I'll hurl something at the windscreen and shut them up in a minute. You carry on talking.
No, this is the sort of case where the Secretary of State for Health needs to get people in a room and say, right, let's all agree. This is what physician associates do, because it's obviously good to take the burdens off doctors where we can. And this is what they don't do, because it's obviously bad to let them do the more complex things. So let's all agree some guidelines. Let's have that all across the country. Now, why don't you all agree to it and go and implement that? I think a little bit of leadership ought to be able to sort this out.
Okay, I think we're going to be talking quite a lot about physician associates over the coming months.